Among the early Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans, it was a common practice to seal lighted lamps in the sepulchres of the dead as offerings to the god of death. It was also believed that these lights could guide the departed through the valley of the shadow. As the custom became established, not only real lamps but also miniature versions in terracotta were placed in the tombs. Some lamps were protected within circular vessels, and records exist of instances where the original oil was discovered perfectly preserved after more than 2,000 years. Evidence suggests that many of these lamps were burning when the sepulchres were sealed, and it has even been claimed that some continued to burn when the vaults were opened centuries later. The possibility of creating a fuel capable of renewing itself as it was consumed became a subject of debate among later writers. From the evidence available, it remains within reason to believe that the priest-chemists of antiquity may have succeeded in producing lamps capable of burning, if not forever, then at least for remarkable lengths of time. Many authorities have studied the subject of the so-called ever-burning lamps, and while their conclusions differ, most admitted the existence of such phenomena. Only a few insisted that the lights could burn eternally, yet many were willing to allow that they might remain alight for centuries without the need of replenished fuel. Some dismissed the lights as artifices contrived by pagan priests, while others, though accepting that the lamps burned, insisted that the miracle was a deception intended to ensnare the credulous. The Jesuit Athanasius Kircher displayed particular inconsistency in his writings on the matter. At one point he declared that these ever-burning lamps were devices of evil powers, placed in tombs to lend false authority to pagan worship. Yet elsewhere he dismissed the entire idea as an impossibility, to be compared with perpetual motion or the philosopher's stone. Later still, he proposed a more natural explanation, suggesting that in Egypt the priests may have secretly drawn oil from underground deposits of asphalt or petroleum through hidden ducts into the lamps, which were equipped with asbestos wicks. By such a device, he reasoned, the lamps could have burned continuously, creating the illusion of everlasting flame. Montfaucon concluded that the so-called perpetual lamps of the ancients were in truth clever mechanical devices. He also explained that the belief in lamps burning indefinitely within tombs likely arose from the fact that in some cases fumes resembling smoke were seen escaping from newly opened vaults. When people later entered and found lamps scattered upon the floor, they assumed these to be the cause of the vapors. Accounts from different times and places tell of remarkable discoveries of ever-burning lamps. One such story speaks of a tomb on the Appian Way, opened during the papacy of Paul III, where a lamp was found still burning in a sealed chamber after nearly 16 centuries. Within lay the body of a young woman with golden hair, preserved in a mysterious liquid as though death had only just occurred. The vault contained several objects, including other lamps, one of them alight. Witnesses declared that when the tomb was opened a sudden draught extinguished the flame, which could not be rekindled. Reports of perpetual lamps come from many lands: Mediterranean regions, India, Tibet, China, and South America, all offering traditions of lights said to burn continuously without fuel. Among the most noted examples are these. Plutarch wrote of a lamp over the temple door of Jupiter Ammon, said to have glowed for centuries. St. Augustine described one in Egypt dedicated to Venus, which no wind or water could quench. In the time of Justinian, a lamp was found burning for more than 500 years in a niche at Edessa. In early medieval England, a light discovered in a monument was said to have burned since the 3rd century. The lantern of Pallas, discovered near Rome in 1401, was found beside the body of Pallas, son of Evander, still burning after 2,000 years. In 1550, a vault on the island of Nices yielded a lamp placed there before the Christian era, yet still alight. Other records add to the mystery. Pausanias told of a golden lamp in the temple of Minerva that glowed for a year without tending, refilled only during an annual rite. The crypt of Christian Rosenkreutz, opened after more than a century, was said to be illuminated by a perpetual lamp suspended from the ceiling, and Numa Pompilius, king of Rome, was believed to have maintained an eternal light within a temple he dedicated to a spirit of nature. In England, a remarkable tomb was discovered containing an automaton that moved whenever certain stones in the floor of the vault were stepped upon. At the time, the Rosicrucian controversy was at its height, and the tomb was believed to belong to a Rosicrucian initiate. A countryman who entered the tomb found the interior brilliantly illuminated by a lamp hanging from the ceiling. As he walked, his weight depressed some floor stones, and immediately a figure in heavy armor began to move. Mechanically, it rose to its feet and struck the lamp with an iron baton, completely destroying it and preventing the discovery of the secret substance that had sustained the flame. How long the lamp had burned was unknown, but it was certainly for a considerable number of years. Similar instances have been reported in tombs near Memphis and in the Brahmin temples of India, where lights were found in sealed chambers and vessels. In these cases, sudden exposure to air caused the lamps to extinguish and their fuel to evaporate. It is now believed that the wicks of these perpetual lamps were made of braided or woven asbestos, known to alchemists as salamander's wool, and that the fuel was the result of alchemical experimentation. Kircher attempted to extract oil from asbestos, reasoning that as the substance itself was indestructible by fire, oil derived from it might provide a similarly enduring fuel. After 2 years of fruitless experimentation, he concluded that the task was impossible. Several recipes for preparing the lamp fuel have been preserved. One example provides insight into the process. Sulfur and alum were sublimated into a purified form, then combined with powdered Venetian borax. High rectified spirit of wine was repeatedly added and removed until the sulfur melted like wax without smoke. The wick was prepared by taking threads of lapis asbestos, coating them with the purified sulfur, and placing them in hot sand for 24 hours so the sulfur would adhere. The wick was then set in a glass container with some part above the mass of prepared sulfur. When placed on hot sand, the sulfur would melt and unite with the wick, and once lighted, the lamp was said to burn with a perpetual flame, capable of being set anywhere desired. The worship of Apollo included the creation and maintenance of places of prophecy through which the gods could communicate with mankind and reveal the future to those deemed worthy. Early Greek history contains numerous accounts of talking trees, rivers, statues, and caves, in which nymphs, dryads, or daimons resided and from which they delivered oracles. While some Christian authors argued that such revelations were the work of the devil to mislead humanity, they did not deny the existence of oracles, since they are repeatedly referenced in sacred texts. If the onyx stones on the shoulders of Israel's high priest revealed the will of Jehovah, then a black dove temporarily granted the power of speech could indeed pronounce oracles in the temple of Jupiter Ammon. Similarly, if the witch of Endor could summon the shade of Samuel to give prophecies to Saul, a priestess of Apollo might call forth a god to foretell Greece's destiny. The most famous oracles of antiquity were those of Delphi, Dodona, Trophonius, and Latona, with the talking oak trees of Dodona being the oldest. Though the origin of oracular prophecy cannot be precisely traced, many caves and fissures regarded as oracles were sacred long before Greek culture fully developed. The oracle of Apollo at Delphi remains one of the enduring mysteries of the ancients. Its name, derived from Delphos, meaning womb, was chosen because of the shape of the cavern and its vent leading into the depths of the earth. The oracle's original name was Pytho, as the chambers were once said to house the great serpent Python, a terrifying creature born from the slime of the flood that had destroyed all humanity except Deucalion and Pyrrha. Apollo, ascending Mount Parnassus, slew Python after a long struggle and cast its body down the fissure of the oracle. From that time, Apollo, surnamed the Pythian, gave oracles from the vent, sharing the honor of Delphi with Dionysus. Though defeated, the spirit of Python remained at Delphi as the representative of Apollo, and its effluvium was believed to allow the priestess to enter into communion with the god. The fumes rising from the fissure were said to emanate from Python's decaying body. The title Pythoness, or Pythia, literally refers to a woman thrown into religious frenzy by inhaling such fumes. The Greeks also considered Delphi the umbilicus of the earth, reflecting their belief in the planet as a vast human-like being. The connection between oracular revelation and the symbolic significance of the navel was a secret of the ancient mysteries. The oracle's origins, however, predate these accounts. Such stories were likely created by priests to explain the phenomena to those not considered worthy of understanding the esoteric nature of the oracle. While some suggest that a Hyperborean priest discovered the Delphic fissure, the cave was sacred from the earliest records, attracting visitors from across Greece and neighboring lands to consult the daimon dwelling in its chimney-like vent. Priests and priestesses carefully guarded the site, serving the spirit who enlightened humanity through the gift of prophecy. The story of the original discovery of the oracle begins with shepherds tending their flocks on the side of Mount Parnassus. They were astonished by the strange behavior of goats near a great chasm on the southwestern spur of the mountain. The animals leaped as if dancing and emitted cries unlike any previously heard. Curious, one shepherd approached the vent, from which noxious fumes were rising. Instantly, he was seized by a prophetic ecstasy. He danced wildly, sang, jabbered inarticulate sounds, and foretold future events. Others who drew near experienced the same effect. Word of the place spread, and many came to learn the future by inhaling the mephitic fumes, which exhilarated to the point of delirium. Some visitors, unable to control themselves and temporarily endowed with the strength of madmen, tore away from those trying to restrain them and jumped into the vent, perishing instantly. To prevent further accidents, a wall was built around the fissure, and a prophetess was appointed to serve as mediator between the oracle and those who came seeking its guidance. Later accounts describe a golden tripod, adorned with carvings of Apollo as the great serpent Python, placed over the cleft. A specially prepared seat was arranged on it, designed to prevent the occupant from falling while under the influence of the oracular fumes. Around this time, a story circulated that the fumes arose from the decaying body of Python, suggesting that the oracle may have revealed its own origin. For many centuries in its early history, virgin maidens were consecrated to the service of the oracle. These women, called Phoebades or Pythii, formed the famous order later known as the Pythian priesthood. Women were likely chosen because their sensitive and emotional nature responded more completely to the fumes of enthusiasm. 3 days before receiving the communications from Apollo, the priestess began the ceremony of purification. She bathed in the Castalian well, abstained from all food, drank only from the fountain of Cassotis, brought into the temple through hidden pipes, and immediately before mounting the tripod, chewed a few leaves of the sacred bay tree. Some have speculated that the water was drugged to induce visions, or that an intoxicating gas was channeled through subterranean ducts into the fissure, though neither theory has been proven, and neither explains the accuracy of the predictions. Once purified, the young prophetess was clothed in sanctified garments and led to the tripod, where she seated herself above the yawning fissure, surrounded by the rising noxious vapors. Gradually, as she inhaled the fumes, a transformation occurred. It was as if another spirit entered her body. She struggled, tore at her clothing, and uttered inarticulate cries. Eventually, her movements ceased, and she assumed a state of calm majesty. With eyes fixed upon space and body rigid, she delivered the prophetic words. The predictions were typically expressed in hexameter verse, though the language was often ambiguous or unintelligible. Every sound and motion of the priestess was carefully recorded by the 5 hosi, or holy men, appointed as scribes to preserve the details of each divination. The hosi served for life and were chosen from the direct descendants of Deucalion. After delivering the oracle, the Pythia would struggle once more as the spirit departed from her. She was then carried or supported to a chamber of rest, where she remained until the nervous ecstasy had fully subsided. Iamblichus describes how the spirit of the oracle, a fiery daimon, or even Apollo himself, took control of the Pythoness and manifested through her. Whether the prophetess received the oracle through a fiery spirit rising from the cavern or while seated on a brazen tripod, she entirely surrendered herself to the divine presence. As the ascending fire enveloped her, she became filled with divine splendor, and seated on the sacred tripod, she was aligned with the stable prophetic power of the god. Through these operations, she became wholly possessed, illuminated by Apollo in a manner separate from the fire, spirit, or any physical or sacred apparatus of the place. Among the notable visitors to Delphi was Apollonius of Tyana, accompanied by his disciple Damis. After making his offerings and being crowned with a laurel wreath, he carried a branch of the same plant and passed behind the statue of Apollo at the cave's entrance, descending into the sacred oracle chamber. The Pythoness, likewise crowned with laurel and her head bound with white wool, received his question regarding whether his name would be remembered by future generations. She answered affirmatively, but added that it would always be calumniated. Apollonius left the cave in anger, yet history confirmed the prediction, as later generations associated his name with the Antichrist. The messages delivered by the virgin prophetess were recorded and entrusted to the philosophers of the oracle, who interpreted and applied them. These communications were then given to poets, who translated them into odes and lyrics, presenting the words of Apollo in a refined and artistic form for the public. Serpents were a prominent feature at Delphi. The base of the tripod on which the Pythia sat was formed from the twisted bodies of 3 enormous snakes. In some accounts, one method used to induce the prophetic ecstasy was to compel the young priestess to gaze into a serpent's eyes. Entranced and hypnotized, she then spoke with the voice of the god. While the early Pythian priestesses were always young maidens, some still in their teens, a later law decreed that only women past 50 should serve as the oracle's mouthpiece. These older women dressed as young girls and followed the same ceremonial practices as the original Pythii. This change was likely a response to repeated assaults on the priestesses by the profane. During the early history of the Delphian oracle, the god spoke only on every 7th birthday of Apollo. Over time, however, the demand for guidance grew so great that the Pythia was required to seat herself upon the tripod every month. The times for consultation and the questions to be asked were determined by lot or by the vote of the inhabitants of Delphi. The influence of the Delphian oracle upon Greek culture was widely acknowledged to be profoundly constructive. Its responses revealed many a tyrant and foretold his fate. Through the oracle, countless individuals were saved from destruction, perplexed mortals were guided in the right path, useful institutions were encouraged, and discoveries advanced. Its moral influence promoted virtue, and its political influence supported the growth of civil liberty. The oracle of Dodona was presided over by Jupiter, who communicated prophecies through oak trees, birds, and brass vases. Many have noted the resemblance between the rituals at Dodona and those of the Druid priests of Britain and Gaul. The famous oracular dove of Dodona, alighting upon the sacred oaks, spoke at length in the Greek tongue about philosophy and religion and answered the queries of those who travelled from distant lands. The talking trees formed a sacred grove. When the priests sought answers to important questions, they first performed careful and solemn purifications, then entered the grove and addressed the trees, beseeching a reply from the god dwelling within. After posing their questions, the trees spoke with human voices, revealing the desired information. Some accounts suggest that only one tree, a great oak or beech at the heart of the grove, spoke, and because Jupiter was believed to inhabit it, he was sometimes called Phegonius, or one who lives in a beech tree. The most curious oracles of Dodona were the talking vases or kettles. Crafted of brass, these vases were so carefully made that when struck they resonated for hours. In some descriptions, a row of vases was arranged so that striking one caused vibrations to pass to all the others, producing a terrifying din. Other accounts describe a single large vase upon a pillar, beside which stood another column supporting a statue of a child holding a whip. Cords tipped with small metal balls hung from the whip, and the constant wind caused the balls to strike the vase. The priests carefully recorded the number and intensity of the impacts, and the oracles were delivered accordingly. When the original priests of Dodona, the Selwa, vanished mysteriously, the oracle was served for many centuries by 3 priestesses, who interpreted the vases and questioned the sacred trees at midnight. Patrons of the oracles were expected to bring offerings and make contributions. Jupiter was called Dodonian after the city of Dodona in Epirus. Near this city stood a hill densely covered with oak trees, sacred to Jupiter from the most ancient times. The grove was further revered because dryads, fauns, satyrs, and nymphs were believed to dwell within its depths. From the ancient oaks and beeches hung many chains of tiny bronze bells, which tinkled day and night as the wind swayed the branches. Some accounts suggest that the celebrated talking dove of Dodona was in reality a woman, for in Thessaly both prophetesses and doves were called Peliodas. The first temple of Dodona was said to have been erected by Deucalion and those who survived the great flood with him, making the oracle of Dodona the oldest in Greece. Another remarkable oracle was the cave of Trophonius, situated on the side of a hill, with an entrance so small it seemed impossible for a human to enter. After making an offering at the statue of Trophonius and donning sanctified garments, the consultant climbed the hill carrying a cake of honey in one hand. Sitting at the edge of the opening, he lowered his feet into the cavern, whereupon his entire body was suddenly drawn in. Those who entered described the cave as having only the dimensions of a fair-sized oven. After the oracle completed its revelation, the consultant, often delirious, was forcibly ejected, feet first. Near the cave flowed two fountains, emerging from the earth within a few feet of each other. Those about to enter the cave first drank from these waters, which were believed to possess special occult properties. The first contained the water of forgetfulness, erasing earthly sorrows, while the second, the sacred water of mnemosyne, enabled visitors to later recall their experiences in the cave. Though its entrance was marked by two brass obelisks, the cave itself, surrounded by a wall of white stones and concealed within a grove of sacred trees, did not appear imposing. Yet those entering underwent strange experiences, and were required to leave a complete account of what they saw and heard at the adjacent temple. The prophecies came in the form of dreams and visions, often accompanied by severe pains in the head, and some never fully recovered from the after-effects. The priests likely used some unknown herb to induce these dreams and visions, but their skill in interpreting them was regarded as almost supernatural. Before consulting the oracle, it was necessary to offer a ram to the daimon of the cave, and the priest determined by hieromancy whether the time chosen was favorable and the sacrifice acceptable. Many sculptors and architects of the ancient world were initiates of the mysteries, particularly the Eleusinian rites. From the earliest times, the truers of stone and the hewers of wood formed a divinely guided caste. As civilization slowly spread across the earth, cities were built and abandoned, monuments were raised to heroes now unknown, temples were constructed for gods whose names lie broken in the dust of the nations they once inspired. Research has shown that the builders of these cities and monuments, and the sculptors who carved the inscrutable faces of the gods, were masters of their crafts. Their skill has never been equaled in the modern world. The profound knowledge of mathematics and astronomy reflected in ancient architecture, along with the detailed understanding of anatomy revealed in Greek statuary, demonstrates that these artisans were deeply cultured and possessed the wisdom of the mysteries. From this tradition arose the Guild of the Builders, the forerunners of modern Freemasons. When employed to construct palaces, temples, or tombs, or to carve statues for the wealthy, these initiated architects and artists concealed in their works the secret doctrines, so that even long after their bones have returned to dust, it is evident that these first artisans were duly initiated and deserving of the title of Master Masons. The seven wonders of the world, while apparently built for diverse purposes, were in reality monuments designed to perpetuate the arcana of the mysteries. They were symbolic structures placed in precise locations, and their true significance can be understood only by the initiated. These wonders were erected by the sons of widows in honor of the seven planetary genii, and their secret symbolism corresponds to the seven seals and the seven churches described in Revelation. The Colossus of Rhodes, a gigantic brass statue approximately 109 feet tall, required over 12 years to complete and was the work of the initiated artist Chars of Lindus. The long-standing belief that the figure straddled the entrance to the harbor, allowing full-rigged ships to pass beneath its feet, has never been substantiated. The statue stood for only 56 years before being toppled by an earthquake in 224 BC. Its shattered remains lay scattered for more than 9 centuries until sold to a merchant, who transported the metal on the backs of 700 camels. Some believed the brass was converted into munitions, others that it became drainage pipes. The gilded figure, crowned with solar rays and bearing an upraised torch, symbolized occultly the Son-Man of the mysteries, the universal Savior. In the 5th century BC, the architect Ctesiphon presented the Ionian cities with plans to erect a joint monument to their patron goddess Diana at Ephesus, south of Smyrna. Constructed of marble, the temple's roof was supported by 127 columns, each 60 feet high and weighing over 150 tons. Destroyed by black magic around 356 BC, an act attributed to a deranged man named Herostratus, the original temple was a miniature representation of the universe, dedicated to the moon as the occult symbol of generation. Though later rebuilt, the original symbolism was lost. Upon his exile from Athens, Phidias, the greatest Greek sculptor, went to Olympia in Elis and designed a colossal statue of Zeus, chief of the gods of Greece. Only a few old coins provide an idea of its appearance. The god's body was overlaid with ivory, and his robes were of beaten gold. One hand held a globe supporting the goddess of victory, the other a scepter surmounted by an eagle. Zeus's head was archaic, heavily bearded, and crowned with an olive wreath, seated upon an elaborately decorated throne. The monument was dedicated to the spirit of Jupiter, one of the 7 Logi who served the Lord of the Sun. Among the 7 wonders, the Temple of Solomon is included, taking the place of the Pharos, or lighthouse, of Alexandria. The Pharos, constructed on the island of Pharos by Sostratus of Cnidus during the reign of Ptolemy, was over 600 feet high and made of white marble. Fires lit at its summit were visible for miles at sea. Destroyed by an earthquake in the 13th century, its remains were visible until 1350 AD. As the tallest of the wonders, it was assigned to Saturn, the father of the gods and illuminator of humanity. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus was erected by Queen Artemisia in memory of her husband, King Mausolus, from whom the term mausoleum is derived. Designed by Satyrus and Pythis, with 4 sculptors embellishing the structure, the building measured 114 feet long and 92 feet wide, divided into 5 sections representing the senses, and surmounted by a pyramid representing the spiritual nature of man. The pyramid rose in 24 steps, with a statue of Mausolus in a chariot atop, measuring 9 feet 9.5 inches. Destroyed by an earthquake, the monument was sacred to Mars and built by an initiate for the enlightenment of the world. The gardens of Semiramis at Babylon, or the Hanging Gardens, stood within Nebuchadnezzar's palace near the Euphrates. Rising in terrace-like pyramids, they included a reservoir at the top for watering the gardens. Built around 600 BC, the landscape artist's name is lost, but the gardens symbolized the plains of the invisible world and were consecrated to Venus, goddess of love and beauty. The Great Pyramid was supreme among the temples of the mysteries. To align with its astronomical symbolism, it must have been constructed around 70,000 years ago. It served as the tomb of Osiris and was believed to have been built by the gods themselves, possibly designed by the immortal Hermes. The pyramid was sacred to Mercury, messenger of the gods, and served as a universal symbol of wisdom and letters. Trophonius and his brother Agamemnon were renowned architects. While constructing a treasure vault, they designed one stone to be movable, allowing them secretly to enter and take the valuables stored within. The owner, having discovered the plot, set a trap. Agamemnon was caught, and to prevent further discovery, Trophonius decapitated his brother and fled, pursued fiercely. He hid in the grove of Lebadia, where the earth opened and swallowed him. Thereafter, the spirit of Trophonius delivered oracles from the grove and its caverns. The name Trophonius signifies to be agitated, excited, or roiled, reflecting the profound disturbances endured by those consulting the oracle, who were said never to smile again. The bees associated with his figure were sacred, for they guided the first envoys from Boeotia to the site of the oracle. A statue of Trophonius was placed atop the hill above the oracle, surrounded by sharply pointed stakes to prevent it from being touched.